The soft glow of the morning sun spilled across the wide, quiet streets of Delhi. There was a gentle breeze carrying the smell of fresh jasmine flowers. Mixed with the distant aroma of tea stalls preparing for the busy day ahead, people started waking up slowly, stretching their arms as they looked at the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. In a small, old house tucked behind a line of mango trees, an elderly woman sat on a wooden chair by the window, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her hair was long and silver, tied in a simple braid that fell over her shoulder. She wore a plain cotton sari, the fabric faded from years of washing. But her eyes held a quiet strength that could melt even the hardest hearts. This woman was Lakshmi Pichai, Sundar Pichai's mother. Despite her son being one of the most powerful and respected tech leaders in the world, she had chosen to live a simple life, away from all the noise and glamour. She loved tending to her small garden, talking to her neighbors, and feeding stray dogs that gathered near her gate every morning. She felt joy in small things, like watching the marigolds bloom or feeling the warm sun on her face. Inside the same house, Sundar stood near the kitchen doorway, watching his mother with deep affection. He had arrived from America just the night before, without telling anyone. He wanted to surprise her, to feel her warmth, and to smell the familiar spices in her cooking. His mother had been his pillar, his guiding light when he felt lost during his tough early days in a foreign land. He remembered all the nights she stayed up, waiting for him to come home safely from the library or from extra classes. He remembered how she gave up her favorite sweets just to save a little more money for his books. These memories stayed close to his heart, no matter how high he climbed. As he walked toward her carrying a small steel cup filled with hot ginger tea, he felt an ache in his chest. It was an ache of gratitude, of love so deep it brought tears to his eyes. He handed her the cup, and she looked up at him with a soft smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. She took the tea, patted his hand, and asked him if he had eaten anything. Sundar nodded, but she didn't believe him. She stood up slowly, her bones protesting with tiny cracks, and went to the kitchen to prepare his favorite breakfast soft, idealise with coconut chutney and spicy sambar. As she cooked, she talked about small things: the neighbor's new cow, the temple festival coming next week, and the mango tree that had finally started giving sweet fruit again. Sundar listened carefully, as if every word was a blessing. He didn't interrupt her, just watched her movements. The way she stirred the chutney, the way she tested the softness of the idealist with her fingers. He felt like a small boy again, sitting at the edge of the kitchen slab, watching his mother create magic with her hands. After breakfast, they sat together in the courtyard. Sundar told her about his work, but in simple words. He didn't talk about billion-dollar deals or global conferences. He spoke about his struggles, about feeling lonely in big rooms filled with important people, about missing home-cooked food, and about wanting to come back more often. His mother listened without judgment, just nodding, her eyes growing moist now and then. She placed her hand gently on his head, blessing him silently. Sundar closed his eyes, feeling the world slow down, his mind becoming clear like a calm lake. The next morning, Sundar received an unexpected call. It was from the Prime Minister's office. He felt a sudden tightness in his chest when he saw the caller ID, picked up, and a warm voice on the other side told him that Modi ji himself wanted to meet him. Not just him, but his mother too. Sundar was stunned. He looked at his mother, who was busy folding clothes, unaware of the storm about to enter their quiet home. After the call, Sundar sat next to her and told her everything. At first, she laughed softly, thinking he was joking. She had never imagined meeting someone so important. She felt nervous, embarrassed even. She said she didn't have the right clothes, didn't know how to speak properly, and didn't belong in such grand places. Sundar held her hands and told her she was perfect, just as she was. He said that no designer sari, no fancy jewelry, and no big words could ever match the beauty and power of her simple heart. After some gentle convincing, she finally agreed. Sundar helped her pick out her nicest sari, an old cream-colored one with a thin red border. She wore it only on special days like festivals. He carefully ironed it for her, his hands shaking slightly. He then helped her pin the pallu neatly, making sure it didn't slip. She watched him, her eyes filled with tears of pride and love. She tried to say something, but her throat choked up. She simply touched his cheek. When the day of the meeting came, a sleek black car arrived at their humble home. Neighbors peeked through their windows. Some stood outside their gates, whispering in excitement. A few children pointed and clapped, shouting Sundar's name as if he were a movie star. Lakshmi stepped into the car hesitantly, clutching the edge of her sari. Sundar sat beside her, holding her hand firmly, whispering soft words of comfort. The car drove through the streets of Delhi, past busy markets, honking rickshaws, and colorful flower stalls. Lakshmi looked outside, her eyes wide, taking in every detail as if it were a dream. As they neared the large hall where the event was to be held, Sundar felt a sudden rush of emotions, remembered all the times he stood alone on big stages, facing thousands of people, his heart pounding like a drum. But today felt different. Today he wasn't alone. His mother was by his side, her presence stronger than any trophy or award he had ever received. He knew this day would become a golden memory, something he would hold on to when life became overwhelming. The car stopped in front of a grand building with shining glass walls and huge flags fluttering in the breeze. The security guards stood straight, their eyes scanning the area carefully. As soon as Sundar and his mother stepped out, the crowd erupted in cheers. Reporters with cameras and mics rushed forward, clicking photos, shouting questions. But Sundar ignored them, focusing only on his mother, making sure she didn't feel overwhelmed. He guided her gently, shielding her from the blinding camera flashes. Inside the hall, the atmosphere was electric. The ceiling sparkled with thousands of tiny lights, and flower arrangements lined the sides of the huge stage. Important guests in expensive suits and silk saris filled the seats, whispering among themselves, waiting eagerly. The air smelled of roses and sandalwood, mixed with a hint of nervous excitement. Sundar walked with his mother slowly down the long aisle, each step echoing loudly in his heart as they approached the front. They saw Modi ji standing on the stage talking to some dignitaries. When he saw Sundar and his mother, he paused. A warm smile spread across his face, and he excused himself politely, then stepped down from the stage and started walking toward them. Lakshmi felt her knees go weak. She gripped Sundar's arm, tightly whispering that she wanted to turn back. Sundar looked at her and said, "Amma, you were stronger than you think." As Modi ji came closer, the entire hall fell silent. It was as if the air itself had frozen. Every eye followed his every step. Sundar felt his heartbeat in his ears. Lakshmi tried to steady her breathing, her eyes wide with disbelief. Finally, Modi ji stood in front of them. He didn't say anything at first. He simply folded his hands deeply and bowed his head toward Lakshmi. The hall gasped. Some people stood up in respect. Lakshmi looked at Sundar, confused, her eyes asking 1,000 silent questions. Modi ji then stepped forward, took Lakshmi's hands gently, and looked straight into her eyes. He spoke softly, words only she and Sundar could hear. Lakshmi's lips trembled. She tried to say something, but no words came out. Instead, tears rolled down her wrinkled cheeks, falling onto her sari like pearls. Sundar watched, feeling a surge of emotion so powerful that he thought he might collapse. Modi ji then turned slightly and looked at Sundar, his eyes warm but filled with a deep seriousness. He nodded slowly, as if silently acknowledging the unspoken bond between mother and son. The cameras continued flashing, but for that moment, it felt like they were in a small bubble, untouched by the outside world. Sundar held his mother's hand tightly, feeling the softness of her skin, the strength hidden in her fragile fingers. The hall remained completely silent, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Sundar's mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. He felt proud, overwhelmed, and scared all at once. He wondered what Modi ji would say next. He wondered how his mother would react. He wondered how this moment would change their lives forever. And just as soon, I tried to steady his shaking hands. Modi ji took a deep breath and opened his mouth to speak. Modi ji stood so close that Lakshmi could feel the warmth of his breath. His eyes were kind, but there was a sharp intelligence behind them. as if he could see right into her heart. He held her hands gently, like one might hold a delicate flower, and for a long moment, he didn't say a word. The hall remained so silent that even the smallest rustle of a sari or the softest cough echoed like thunder. Reporters stood frozen, their cameras forgotten for a moment. Guests who had once been busy chatting or checking their phones now sat straight, their eyes wide, as if they had just witnessed a miracle. Then Modi Ji finally spoke, his voice low and soft but carrying deep power. He said, "Amma, you have given this country a gem. Not just a brilliant mind, but a kind heart that inspires millions. Today we do not honor your son alone. We honor the mother who shaped him, who taught him humility, patience, and kindness." Lakshmi's lips parted, but her voice failed her. Her eyes filled again, blurring her view. She squeezed Sundar's hand as if to make sure she was still standing. Still real. As the words sank in, Lakshmi's shoulders shook softly. She was not used to such attention, such grand words directed at her. All her life she had been in the background, always choosing to stay quiet, to let others shine. She believed in silent service, waking up before dawn to sweep the yard, boiling milk before anyone else stirred, praying quietly by the small shrine in the corner of the house. She had lived her entire life believing that greatness belonged to others, not to simple women like her. But now, here she was, standing in a grand hall, in front of hundreds of people and cameras, with one of the most powerful leaders in the world holding her hands and bowing his head in respect. It felt unreal, like a dream she would soon wake up from. She turned her head slightly and saw Sundar's eyes glimmering with pride and deep emotion. It made her chest tighten, her breath catch. She tried to look away, but Sundar moved closer, whispering softly, "Amma, you deserve this. You are the reason I am here." Lakshmi felt her knees tremble. She had never heard him say it so openly. He had always been a quiet boy, respectful and shy. He would thank her in small ways, by bringing her a mango from the market, by massaging her tired feet at night, or by sending her handwritten letters filled with simple words. But today, standing beside him, hearing his soft confession, she felt something deep break open inside her. A flood of memories rushed into her mind, the nights she had stayed up worrying when he was sick, the afternoons she had spent stitching his torn school uniforms, the countless prayers she had whispered while he studied under the dim lamp. All those small sacrifices, all those unnoticed moments, they all stood before her now, shining brighter than any gold. As Modi Ji continued speaking, he gently led Lakshmi toward the stage. Sundar followed, his hands still clasping his mother's firmly. The entire hall rose to its feet, a slow wave of applause building up, growing louder with each second.
Ow!
Some people had tears in their eyes, others pressed their palms together in namaste. It was not just a gesture for a famous son or a powerful leader. It was for a mother who had embodied true strength and simplicity. When they reached the stage, a beautiful chair carved with delicate designs was waiting for Lakshmi. She hesitated, looking at Sundar, her eyes pleading. She didn't want to sit on something so grand. She was used to sitting on the floor at home on a simple mat, eating from a steel plate. Sundar nodded encouragingly, and with shaky steps, she sat down. Modi Ji stood beside her, one hand resting gently on her shoulder, as if she were a queen being honored in front of her people. Modi Ji then raised his hand, signaling for the hall to settle. The applause slowly faded, leaving behind an air charged with emotion and respect. He took the microphone, his voice calm yet filled with passion. "Friends," he began, "we often celebrate success stories, big achievements, and powerful people. But behind every strong person stands someone even stronger, a mother. Today we celebrate a mother who chose to live a life of simplicity, who believed in quiet strength, and who nurtured one of India's brightest sons." As he spoke, Sundar looked at the audience, saw men and women leaning forward, listening with wide eyes. Some were whispering softly to each other, some wiping their tears. He realized that in that moment, this wasn't just about him or his mother. It was about every mother who had silently carried heavy loads, every parent who had given up their own dreams so their children could fly. He felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to say something, but the words felt stuck. Modi ji continued today. I want to tell you a story of sacrifices that no one saw, of dreams whispered in the corners of small kitchens, of hands that fed, cleaned, and comforted without asking for anything in return. He paused, letting the words sink deep into the hearts of those listening. Then he turned slightly toward Lakshmi, his voice softening even more. Amma, you are the true leader today. You've taught your son values that no school or book could teach. You are the light that guided him, and through him you have touched the entire world. Lakshmi looked down at her hands, the hands that had washed so many clothes, kneaded dough, and braided her son's hair when he was small. She never imagined those hands would be held and praised in such a place. She felt an overwhelming urge to hide her face, but Sundar gently touched her chin, lifting her head slightly. She met his gaze and saw nothing but pure love. In that moment she felt something shift inside her, a small seed of self-respect, blooming quietly as Modi ji stepped back, giving the microphone to Sundar. The hall leaned forward again. Sundar stood still for a moment, taking a deep breath. He looked at the crowd, then at his mother. He spoke slowly, carefully choosing each word as if it were a sacred offering. My mother's my first teacher, he began. She taught me to be patient when things were hard, to stay humble even when I succeeded, and to always remember where I came from. She is the reason I stand here today. He paused, his voice shaking slightly. When I was a young boy, I often felt small, unsure of myself. There were days I came home crying because I didn't fit in, because I was different. On those days, Amma would make me sit next to her in the kitchen. She would give me a piece of jaggery and tell me stories about gods and heroes who stayed true to their hearts. She told me that even the smallest candle can light up the darkest room. His words floated through the hall like a gentle river, touching every heart. Some audience members had closed their eyes, as if holding the words close. Sundar continued, even when I went abroad, even when I faced big challenges, her words stayed with me. Whenever I felt lost, I remembered the smell of her cooking, the warmth of her hands on my forehead, and the quiet strength in her eyes. As he spoke, Lakshmi pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart race. She looked at Sundar, seeing not the global leader but her little boy who once held her sari palu while learning to walk. She felt the lines of her face deepen with emotion, each wrinkle telling a story of love and sacrifice. Sundar turned to her again, his eyes soft. Amma, today's your day. Today the world sees what I have always known, that you are my biggest achievement. He stepped forward, kneeling gently beside her chair. He took her hands in his, bowing his head. Lakshmi trembled, her fingers tightening around his. He wanted to pull him up, but he remained still, his head resting on her hands as if seeking her blessing once again. The hall filled with the sound of hands coming together slowly, building up into a thunderous applause. It was not the kind of applause reserved for movie stars or politicians. It was pure, raw, and deeply heartfelt. Some people stood up, clapping with all their strength. Others wiped their faces, trying to hide their tears from the cameras. The sound echoed through the hall, bouncing off the walls like a roaring wave of love and respect. Lakshmi finally managed to find her voice, though it was small and shaky. She leaned towards Sundar, whispering, "Get up, Kana. You make me proud just by being you." Sundar looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears, and slowly rose to his feet. He then turned to Modi ji, who was watching them closely, his eyes moist. Modi ji stepped forward again, taking Sundar's shoulder with one hand and Lakshmi's hand with the other. Modi ji spoke again, his voice firm, yet full of warmth. Today we do not just honor a mother and son. We honor an idea that humility is strength, that love is the greatest power, and that behind every great achievement lies a story of silent sacrifice. The audience responded with another wave of applause, echoing through the hall like a heartbeat. Just then, a group of young students, dressed in crisp white uniforms, walked onto the stage holding small dias, their soft flames flickering gently. They formed a semicircle behind Lakshmi and Sundar. One by one, they stepped forward and placed the diyas at her feet, bowing deeply before stepping back. It was a symbolic gesture, a tribute from the future generation to the quiet strength of motherhood. Lakshmi's eyes widened in surprise, her lips trembling as she watched the soft lights gather around her feet like stars fallen from the sky. The hall lights dimmed slightly, making the diyas glow brighter. Oh, the scent of jasmine and sandalwood seemed stronger now, wrapping around everyone like a comforting embrace. In that moment, the stage transformed into a sacred space. Glowing softly with warmth and respect, Sundar looked around, taking in every detail. He knew that this moment would stay with him forever. No award, no big business deal, no magazine cover could ever match this feeling. He felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He realized that all his life, he had been chasing recognition and success, but the true award had always been at home. Sitting quietly, waiting for him, Lakshmi sat motionless, overwhelmed, her hands resting on her lap. Her fingers slightly curled as if holding an invisible thread. Of all her memories, she closed her eyes for a moment, and in that darkness, she saw her husband standing in the old courtyard. Saw little Sundar running with a wooden toy airplane. Saw herself humming lullabies late into the night. She opened her eyes again, a soft sigh escaping her lips. As the students stepped off the stage, a hush fell over the audience. Modi ji took a final step forward, as if preparing to say something even deeper. Sundar felt his breath catch. He looked at his mother, then at Modi ji, his mind racing with questions. What was Modi ji about to reveal? What surprise did he hold? Sundar felt his heart beating faster, each thump echoing in his ears. Modi ji looked at Sundar and Lakshmi, then turned to the audience, his face serious but gentle. He raised his hands slowly, and the hall fell into complete silence. Even the tiniest sounds disappeared. Everyone waited, eyes wide, leaning forward. Modi ji's gaze swept across the room, landing on each person, as if connecting with them one by one. He took a slow, deep breath, and then he began to speak again. Modi ji stood still for a long moment. His eyes locked onto the audience, as if he were about to share a secret that had been waiting for years to be heard. He lowered his hand slowly, his fingers trembling slightly, revealing a vulnerability that surprised everyone present. He looked back at Lakshmi, then at Sundar, and took another slow breath. Gathering his thoughts like a farmer, carefully gathering precious grains after a harvest. "There is something I want to tell all of you today," he began, his voice softer than before but carrying a deep, echoing weight. "It is not about technology or politics. It is about the invisible threads that bind us all together, threads of love, sacrifice, and unspoken strength." As his words filled the silent hall, the audience leaned even closer, their eyes wide, their breaths shallow. It felt as if time itself had slowed down, each heartbeat echoing in the huge room like a distant drum. Sundar felt his fingers tighten around his mother's hand, sensing that something important was coming, something that would change everything. Modi ji continued, "When I was a young man traveling across India, visiting small villages and remote towns, I met many mothers like Amma here. They opened their homes to me, shared their last piece of roti, offered me water when they barely had enough for themselves. These mothers never asked for recognition or reward. Their love was quiet, but it was stronger than any mountain, deeper than any ocean." He paused, his eyes turning misty as old memories flickered across his mind like fading photographs. "Amma, today I see in you the same spirit, the same quiet power that built this country brick by brick, heart by heart. You are the real foundation of our nation." Lakshmi's lips trembled, and she looked down at her lap, unable to meet his gaze. Her fingers twisted together, her knuckles pale from the tight grip. She felt as if the walls of her small home had been lifted and placed here for all to see, every small act of love, every silent prayer, laid bare under the bright lights. It was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Modi ji took a slow step toward her, his feet echoing on the polished floor. He reached into the pocket of his long kurta and pulled out a small, folded piece of cloth. Carefully, he opened it to reveal a simple, handmade garland of fresh jasmine flowers. The delicate white petals glistened under the lights, their scent drifting softly across the stage like a gentle whisper. The audience gasped quietly, many placing hands over their hearts. Sensing the sacredness of the moment, Modi Ji bent slightly, his hands shaking just a bit, and placed the garland around Lakshmi's neck. It rested lightly on her shoulders, the petals touching her skin like a tender blessing. Lakshmi's eyes widened, and for a moment, she stopped breathing. Her hands rose instinctively to touch the flowers, her fingers brushing over them as if to make sure they were real. A tear slipped down her cheek, followed by another until her face was wet with emotion. She looked up at Modi Ji, her lips trying to form words, but nothing came out except a small, choked sound. Sundar stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on her back. He felt her trembling under his touch, felt the storm of feelings raging. Inside her fragile body, Modi Ji straightened up, turning back to the audience. "This garland," he said, holding up the empty cloth that had carried the flowers, "was made by village women from Tamil Nadu. They sent it to me as a token of love and respect. Today I pass it on to Amma, because she represents every mother, every woman who has silently shaped this nation's destiny." As he spoke, the hall erupted into a wave of applause, louder than before, raw and full of soul. It felt as if every clap carried the weight of unspoken gratitude. Each beat a soft echo of all the mothers who had gone unnoticed in the shadows of their children's success. People stood again, some crying openly, some whispering prayers, others simply standing in silent reverence. Lakshmi sat frozen, the jasmine garland heavy with meaning around her neck. She felt both small and enormous at once. A simple woman, from a quiet neighborhood, yet in this moment, she was the heart of an entire nation. Her mind spun with images, the tiny kitchen back home, the rough towel she used to wipe Sundar's forehead during fevers, the sweet smell of cardamom in her evening tea, the feel of her husband's old shirt she kept folded at the bottom of her trunk. All these simple things now seemed to glow with new light, as if they had been preparing her for this moment her whole life. Sundar looked at her with eyes full of tears. He wanted to say so many things to thank her, to apologize for all the times he had been too busy, too far, too caught up in his world to notice her silent sacrifices. But the words were too heavy, stuck deep in his throat. Instead, he leaned down, gently pressing his forehead against her shoulder. Lakshmi turned slightly, her hand rising to rest on his head. She didn't need words. The silent touch was enough. It said everything that needed to be said. Meanwhile, the audience slowly settled back into their seats, though the emotional energy hung heavy in the air like morning mist. Even the journalists, who usually shouted questions and chased sensational moments, stood quietly, many wiping their eyes before lifting their cameras again. It was no longer just a media event. It had become a shared experience of love and humanity. Modi Ji signaled for the microphone again, his face reflecting a deep calm. "Friends," he said, his voice firm but gentle, "today we have witnessed something beyond titles, beyond fame or power. We have seen the real meaning of success. It is not measured by wealth or awards, but by the love and values passed from one generation to the next." As he spoke, a hush fell over the entire hall once more. Every ear strained to catch each word, every eye stayed fixed on him, as if afraid to miss even a single movement. Sundar felt his breath slow, his heart calming under the gentle rhythm of Modi Ji's words. He squeezed his mother's hand again, feeling her pulse match his own. Modi Ji looked at Sundar now, his eyes twinkling softly. "Sundar," he said, "you have carried your mother's teachings with grace. In your journey from a small house in Chennai to leading one of the world's largest companies, you never lost your roots. You showed us that true greatness is not in rising above others, but in lifting others as you rise." Sundar's eyes filled again, and he nodded slightly, unable to trust his voice. He felt the memories come flooding back, his first job interview, his sleepless nights at Stanford, the long, lonely walks in foreign cities where he wished for his mother's simple meals and quiet company. He realized that every step he had taken had always been guided by her invisible hand, her silent prayers. Then Modi Ji did something unexpected. He stepped forward, placing both hands on Sundar's shoulders. He looked into his eyes deeply, then slowly, respectfully, he bent forward and touched Sundar's feet. The entire hall gasped. Some people dropped their programs, others clutched each other's arms in shock. Sundar froze, his mouth opening in surprise. He tried to stop Modi ji, but before he could move, Modi ji had already stood back up. The Prime Minister of India had just shown respect to his son in front of his mother. It was a gesture more powerful than any speech, any award, or any title. Lakshmi gasped loudly, covering her mouth with both hands. Tears poured down her face, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Sundar felt his legs go weak, and for a moment, he thought he might fall. He looked at Modi ji, searching his face for an explanation, but all he saw was deep humility and love. Modi ji spoke softly, so only Sundar and Lakshmi could hear. When we honor the mother, we must also honor the son who carries her light forward. His words wrapped around them like a warm blanket, sinking deep into their bones. Sundar nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the floor, unable to process the overwhelming waves of emotion crashing over him around them. The hall was still in a stunned silence, the air heavy with reverence. After what felt like an eternity, people slowly began to stand again, some pressing their palms together in a respectful namaste. Others simply closing their eyes, offering silent prayers. Reporters who had once been aggressive now stood quietly, some lowering their cameras as if they felt unworthy to capture such a sacred moment. Lakshmi finally lowered her hands from her face, her eyes red and swollen, but shining with a deep, glowing pride. She looked at her son and saw not just the global leader, but the little boy she once carried on her hip. The boy who fell asleep clutching her sari paloo, who once cried when he lost his wooden toy. She felt her heart expand beyond her chest, filling the entire hall, the entire world. Sundar looked at her, his lips trembling. He finally found his voice, though it was small and rough. "Amma," he whispered, "I am nothing without you." Lakshmi leaned forward, placing her forehead against his, closing her eyes. For a moment, the bright stage, the cameras, the glittering lights, all disappeared. It was just a mother and her son, locked in a timeless, silent conversation of the heart. Modi ji stepped back, giving them space, his own eyes shining with unshed tears. He turned toward the audience, his face solemn but peaceful. He said slowly, "We have all learned what true wealth means. It is not gold or power. It is the silent sacrifices, the small acts of kindness, the love that shapes a soul. We must remember this and carry it into our homes, our workplaces, our hearts." The hall remained silent, each person deep in thought, each heart stirred in ways they hadn't expected when they first walked in. Some began to softly hum devotional songs. Others pressed their hands to their chests, as if steadying their hearts. The air felt thick, alive with shared emotion. Then, without warning, a young girl from the audience stood up. She was small, wearing a simple dress with 2 long braids falling over her shoulders. She looked no older than 10. She stepped forward timidly, her eyes wide but determined. She carried a small marigold flower in her hand, its bright orange petals shining. Under the stage lights, the audience turned, watching her, holding their breaths. She walked slowly up the aisle, her tiny feet echoing in the vast hall. When she reached the stage, she looked up at Lakshmi, her eyes brimming with tears. Without saying a word, she climbed the steps and handed the flower to Lakshmi. Lakshmi took it with shaking hands, her lips trembling again. The girl then did something unexpected. She bent down and touched Lakshmi's feet, pressing her forehead against them in a traditional sign of deep respect. The entire hall broke into another wave of applause, this time mixed with sobs and cries. People stood again, clapping and crying, unable to contain the storm of emotions flooding the room. Sundar stepped back slightly, allowing his mother to hold the little girl's hand. Lakshmi bent forward, lifting the girl up gently and placing a soft kiss on her forehead. The girl smiled shyly, then stepped back and ran toward her mother, who caught her in a tight embrace. Modi ji watched this scene, his face glowing with a rare joy, lifting the microphone. This is our future, he said, his voice full of warmth. This is the spirit we must nurture, a spirit of respect, love, and gratitude. Let this hall today become a temple of these values. As the applause slowly faded, Lakshmi held the marigold close to her chest, its scent mingling with the jasmine garland around her neck. She looked at Sundar, her eyes full of stories of love that needed no words. Sundar smiled softly, his own tears shining like stars in his eyes. They stood there together, mother and son, surrounded by the warm glow of love and respect that filled every corner of the hall. But as they stood, Lakshmi felt a sudden weakness in her legs. Her vision blurred slightly, the edges of the stage starting to spin. She clutched Sundar's arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. Sundar felt the shift instantly, turning to her, his eyes wide with concern. "Amma?" he whispered urgently. Lakshmi tried to smile, but her lips barely moved. Her body swayed slightly, and Sundar tightened his hold, his heart pounding in his ears. Modi ji saw the change too, stepping forward quickly. The audience gasped, some covering their mouths, others standing, unsure whether to rush forward or stay back. The young girl and her mother watched with wide, terrified eyes. Lakshmi took a shallow breath, her hand rising slowly to touch Sundar's cheek one last time. Her fingers trembled as they traced the lines of his face, as if memorizing every detail. Sundar's eyes filled again, his voice breaking. "Amma, stay with me," he pleaded softly, his hand covering hers. Lakshmi opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, her eyes softened, her expression becoming peaceful, as if she had finally let go of a heavy burden. She looked at Sundar one last time, then at Modi ji, and finally at the marigold still clutched in her other hand, and then Lakshmi's hand slipped from Sundar's cheek like a falling leaf drifting softly to the ground. Her body tilted forward, and Sundar caught her quickly, wrapping both arms around her slender frame. Her head rested against his chest, her eyes fluttering like a candle fighting against a strong wind. The hall fell into an even deeper silence, a silence so complete that it felt like the whole world had stopped breathing. The bright lights, the echoes of claps, the scent of jasmine and marigold, everything blended into a soft, distant blur. Sundar felt his heart slam against his ribs, each beat loud and panicked. He looked down at his mother's face, searching desperately for signs of life. Her skin was pale, her lips parted slightly, as if she was trying to say something but had no strength left. Tears streamed down Sundar's face, wetting her forehead as he leaned closer, whispering her name again and again like a prayer he hoped would reach her soul. "Amma, please, stay with me," he pleaded in a trembling voice. He felt like a small boy again, helpless and scared, clutching her like he did when he had nightmares. But this time, the nightmare was real. This time he couldn't just wake up and find her making tea in the kitchen, humming softly. Modi ji rushed forward, his eyes wide with shock and worry. He knelt beside Sundar, his hand reaching out to steady Lakshmi's shoulder. "Call the doctors quickly!" he shouted over his shoulder, his voice shaking. Aides and security guards scrambled to obey, running to the sides of the hall, calling for help through their walkie-talkies, their voices echoing urgently. The audience stood frozen, many with hands covering their mouths, some already sobbing openly. The little girl who had given the marigold clutched her mother's sari tightly, her small face twisted with fear and confusion. Her mother pulled her close, whispering reassurances, even though her own face was pale and wet with tears. Sundar lowered his head, his forehead resting against Lakshmi's. He felt her faint breath against his skin, but it was shallow and slow, like the last few notes of a lullaby fading into the night. He remembered all the times she stayed awake when he was sick, all the nights she held him close during storms, all the soft songs she sang to chase away his fears. And now he felt powerless, unable to protect her the way she had always protected him. He closed his eyes tightly, trying to steady his shaking body. "Amma, I need you," he whispered, his words breaking into sobs. "I'm not ready to let you go." His tears fell onto her cheeks, mixing with hers, creating tiny rivers of shared pain and love. He rocked her gently, as if trying to coax life back into her, as if the warmth of his embrace could fill her lungs again. Doctors rushed onto the stage, carrying medical bags and equipment. They moved quickly, checking her pulse, lifting her eyelids, placing a small oxygen mask over her face. Sundar moved aside reluctantly, his fingers still gripping hers. Modi ji placed a comforting hand on his back, but Sundar barely felt it. He was lost in a fog of fear and grief, his mind replaying every small moment with her, her smile when he returned from school, her gentle scolding when he forgot to eat, her laughter when he teased her about her favorite old radio songs. The doctors worked in tense silence, their brows furrowed, their hands moving quickly but carefully. One doctor glanced at Sundar and then at Modi ji, his eyes serious and sad. Sundar felt a cold wave rush over him as he saw that look, a look he had seen only once before when he lost his father. It was a look that said more than words ever could. Modi ji squeezed Sundar's shoulder gently. "Stay strong, my son," he said softly, his own voice thick with emotion. Sundar didn't respond. He stared at his mother's still face, willing her to open her eyes, to smile at him, to scold him for crying like a child. But her eyelids remained closed, her chest rising and falling weakly under the oxygen mask. Around them, the audience remained standing, their eyes red and shiny under the bright lights. Some people whispered prayers, others joined their hands together in silent pleas. The energy in the hall had changed completely from joyful celebration to a deep shared grief that united everyone present. Minutes passed like slow hours. Every second felt like a lifetime to Sundar. He held her hand tightly, his thumb brushing over the thin skin, feeling each bone, each tiny wrinkle that told the story of her life. He remembered how those hands had taught him to tie his shoelaces, how they had fed him by hand when he was too tired to eat, how they had wiped his tears every time he stumbled. Finally, the head doctor looked up, his face pale, his eyes avoiding Sundar's desperate gaze. He shook his head slowly, a small movement that crashed like a thunderstorm in Sundar's chest. Sundar felt his knees weaken, and he fell forward, burying his face into Lakshmi's lap, his shoulders shaking violently. His sobs filled the silent hall, raw and painful, echoing off the high ceilings. Modi ji bent down beside him, wrapping his arms around Sundar, holding him close as he cried. He closed his own eyes, his face pressed against Sundar's hair, whispering soft words of comfort that dissolved into the air. Around them, people wept openly, some falling to their knees, others hugging each other as they struggled to hold back their own grief. Lakshmi's face looked peaceful, almost like she was sleeping. The jasmine garland around her neck glowed, softly under the stage lights, and the marigold flower still rested in her hand. Its bright color a final symbol of the love and respect she had received in her last moments. It was as if she had chosen this day, this moment, to leave surrounded by love, by her son, by her country. After what felt like an eternity, Sundar lifted his head slowly. His face was red and wet, his eyes swollen and empty. He touched her cheek softly, his fingers tracing the lines, memorizing them one last time. He leaned forward and pressed a long, gentle kiss on her forehead. "Thank you, Amma," he whispered, "for everything." The audience watched in respectful silence. Even the journalists had lowered their cameras, some wiping their own tears. It was a moment too sacred, too pure, to capture in pictures or words. It belonged only to a mother and her son. Modi ji helped Sundar to his feet, his arms still around his shoulders. He looked at Sundar with deep kindness and strength. "Your mother has become immortal today," he said softly. "Her story will inspire millions. Her love will echo through generations. She left this world in the highest honor with her son, by her side, and the entire nation bowing to her strength." "Ow." Sundar nodded slowly, though his eyes were distant, lost in a sea of memories. He turned to the audience, his gaze sweeping across the faces, each one reflecting sorrow and respect. He took a deep, shaky breath and stepped forward, his voice hoarse and quiet. My mother taught me that life is not measured by years, but by the love we give and the kindness we share. She gave everything without ever asking for anything in return. Today she has gone to rest, but her spirit will live in each of us if we choose love over pride, kindness over anger. His words flowed into the crowd like a soft river, gentle and healing. People nodded, some clasping their hands together, others closing their eyes and whispering small prayers. The entire hall felt like a temple, charged with an energy of unity and compassion. Sundar turned back to his mother, reaching down to gently close her eyelids. He arranged the jasmine garland more neatly around her shoulders and placed the marigold flower on her chest. He stood there for a moment, simply looking at her, as if imprinting her image forever in his soul. Then slowly he turned to Modi ji and nodded. Modi ji gave him a small, solemn nod in return, his eyes shining with tears that he no longer tried to hide. They both stood beside Lakshmi, their hands resting on her as if protecting her one last time. A group of women from the audience stepped forward quietly, carrying fresh flowers and small oil lamps. They placed them gently around Lakshmi, creating a circle of light and fragrance. The flickering flames cast a soft glow on her face, making her look almost angelic, as if she were merely resting before waking up to a new dawn. The little girl, who had given the marigold, stepped forward again, her small hands trembling. She looked at Sundar with wide, tearful eyes. Sundar knelt down to her level, his eyes softening slightly. She took a deep breath and whispered, "I wanted to tell her that I want to be like her when I grow up." Her words broke Sundar's heart all over again, but he managed a gentle smile. He touched her head softly and said, "You already carry her spirit inside you. Oh, be kind, and you will make her proud." The girl nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, and ran back to her mother, who pulled her into a tight embrace. Sundar stood up again, feeling a strange calm settle over him, like the quiet after a long storm. He looked at the audience one more time, seeing the sea of faces now unified in silent respect and love. Modi ji raised his hand slowly, signaling to the audience, "Let us honor Emma's memory not just with words today, but with our actions every day forward," he said. "Let us promise to be more patient, more forgiving, more loving. Let us carry her light into our homes and our hearts." The audience responded by joining their hands together in a collective namaste, their heads bowing in unison. It was a moment of pure unity, of shared humanity that transcended all barriers, language, religion, status. In that moment, they were all simply human souls honoring another soul who had given everything. As the hall lights dimmed slightly, a soft devotional song began to play in the background. Its gentle notes floated through the air like a soft breeze, wrapping everyone in a warm, comforting embrace. Sundar stood silently, his eyes closed, letting the music wash over him, letting the memories of his mother fill every corner of his heart. When he opened his eyes again, he felt different. There was a deep ache, an emptiness that would never fully heal, but also a new strength, a quiet fire lit by his mother's love. He knew that her teachings, her values, her kindness, all of it now lived inside him. Waiting to guide him forward, he looked at Modi ji, who gave him a firm nod as if saying, "You are not alone." Sundar nodded back, feeling a fragile, but real thread of connection formed between them. In that moment, they were not prime minister and tech leader. They were two sons, bound by a shared understanding of love and loss. As the song reached its final notes, Sundar bent forward one last time, touching his mother's feet gently. "Goodbye, Emma," he whispered. I will carry you with me, always." The hall remained silent, the air heavy with the sacredness of the moment. Outside, the sky had turned a deep orange as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the city. It felt as if the whole universe had paused to bow its head for Lakshmi. And as Sundar stood up, the light catching the tears on his face, he felt a soft, almost invisible touch on his shoulder, as if his mother's spirit had returned to comfort him one last time. He looked up at the sky, feeling her presence in the breeze, in the fading sunlight, in the quiet heartbeat of the world. But deep inside, even as he tried to hold on to this calm, he felt a new question rising. a question that would change everything. Going forward, what would he do now? How would he honor her legacy, her values, her quiet strength? He knew this was not the end, but a new beginning. And as he stood there, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of the world shift around him, he realized the hall remained filled with a thick, almost sacred silence. Sundar stood motionless beside his mother's body, feeling as if the world had turned into a heavy dream, each moment stretching endlessly. He looked at the garland of jasmine around her neck and the single marigold resting on her chest. Her face looked peaceful, as if she was simply taking a short nap, waiting to wake up and ask him if he had eaten or if he was working too late again. But deep inside, he knew she had taken her final rest, leaving behind a void that felt wider than the ocean. Slowly, the audience began to move again, like a river breaking free after being frozen. Some people knelt to the floor, pressing their foreheads down, whispering prayers that dissolved into the still air. Others stood in small groups, holding each other's hands tightly, their faces pale and wet with tears. It was a collective mourning, an unspoken understanding that they were witnessing not just the loss of a mother, but the passing of a spirit that had touched every heart in that room. Modi Ji stood beside Sundar, his own face drawn with sorrow and deep thought. He looked at Sundar carefully, as if weighing every unspoken emotion in his eyes. He gently placed his hand on Sundar's shoulder again, his fingers firm yet comforting.
This is not the end, my son, he said softly.
This is the beginning of a new chapter, one she wrote for you with every breath she took. Sundar turned to look at him, his eyes empty yet searching for meaning. He wanted to ask how he could continue without her, how he could fill the silence she left behind, but no words came. Instead, he nodded slowly, his chest tight with the ache of unspoken questions. Modi Ji squeezed his shoulder gently and stepped back, giving him space. As the final devotional song faded into a quiet echo, a small group of elderly women walked slowly toward the stage. Each woman carried a small brass lamp, the flames trembling. As they moved, their faces were lined with years of hardship, their saris simple but clean, their eyes reflecting the same timeless strength that Lakshmi had carried. They stepped forward one by one, placing their lamps carefully at Lakshmi's feet. Each lamp added to the circle of light already glowing softly around her, creating an almost ethereal aura. Sundar watched, his breath shallow, his mind drifting back through countless memories, the smell of fresh coriander in the kitchen, the rhythmic sound of the sewing machine in the evening, the gentle tug of her fingers through his hair when he felt sick. Each memory felt like a warm ember, both painful and comforting, burning gently in the quiet darkness inside him suddenly. From the back of the hall, a soft, hesitant voice broke through the silence. "Anna," the voice called, using the Tamil word for elder brother. Sundar turned slowly to see a young man stepping forward, his face pale, his eyes shining with tears. He wore a simple white shirt and dark trousers, his hands trembling as he held a small bundle wrapped in cloth as he reached the stage. He unwrapped the cloth carefully to reveal a framed black and white photograph. It was a picture of Sundar. As a young boy, standing shyly beside Lakshmi in their old home, her arm wrapped protectively around his shoulders. Sundar felt a sharp ache in his chest as he looked at the photo. It was from a day long ago, a day when he had won a small science prize at school. His mother had insisted on taking a picture, though they had to borrow a neighbor's camera. The young man held out the photograph with shaking hands. "This belongs here," he whispered. Sundar took the photo slowly, his fingers brushing over the worn, wooden frame. He looked down at it, his eyes filling again. He remembered that day, clearly, the way his mother had hidden her tears of pride behind her sari pallu. The way she had cooked his favorite sweet rice pudding, even though they didn't have enough sugar. He traced the outline of her face. In the photo, his thumb lingering over her soft smile, he bent down and placed the photograph at her feet, leaning it carefully against her folded hands. It felt like placing a piece of their shared life back where it belonged, closing a circle that had begun so many years ago in the quiet corners of their small kitchen. The young man stepped back, joining the audience again. Sundar looked at the photograph once more, then closed his eyes, breathing in deeply as if trying to pull her essence back into him. He felt the warmth of her love swirl around him, almost like an invisible shawl being draped across his shoulders. After a few moments, Mourning stepped forward again, his voice soft but clear. "Today, we have all witnessed a story that goes beyond any one family," he said. "We have seen the true face of devotion, the quiet heroism of a mother who chose to live for others, who gave every piece of herself without expecting applause or praise. We have been blessed to share this moment." His words rippled across the audience, their hearts echoing with silent agreement. People began to come forward in small groups, placing small garlands, flowers, and handwritten notes at Lakshmi's feet. Each gesture carried a personal prayer, a private thank you for the inspiration she had unknowingly given them. Some left folded letters, others offered simple strings of wildflowers picked on their way to the hall. Sundar watched all of this, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. At that moment, a group of children, guided by their teachers, approached the stage. They moved carefully, each carrying a small drawing or painting. Some were simple, stick figures of mothers and children holding hands. Others were colorful depictions of sunrises, flowers, and smiling faces. They laid these drawings gently around Lakshmi, creating a bright, living tapestry of gratitude and love. One small boy stepped forward, his face nervous but determined. He held a tiny drawing of a house with a mango tree and two figures standing. Under it, he looked up at Sundar, his eyes wide and honest. "This is your home, Anna," he said softly. "You should never forget it." Sundar knelt down, taking the drawing with trembling hands. He looked at it closely, recognizing the simple lines and bright colors, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He pulled the boy into a gentle hug, his voice a rough whisper. "Thank you, Kanna. I will never forget." As the boy stepped back, Sundar felt a surge of warmth spread through his chest. In that simple moment, he saw the real measure of his mother's life, not in wealth or awards, but in the quiet ripples she had created, ripples that reached even the smallest hearts. He realized that her legacy was now alive in every person, in that hall, in every tear, every folded hand, every child's drawing. Mourning, seeing Sundar's quiet strength returning, stepped beside him once more. "What will you do now?" he asked gently, his voice low so only Sundar could hear. Sundar stood slowly, wiping his eyes, his gaze steady but soft. He looked around the hall at the sea of faces filled with love and grief, the flowers and lamps glowing softly around his mother. He took a deep breath, as if drawing strength from the very air. "I will continue her work," he said finally, his voice calm but full of emotion. "I will not let her light fade. I will build, help, and inspire, not for fame, but for love, for kindness, for the quiet strength she showed me every day." Mourning nodded slowly, his eyes shining with approval. "That is the path of true greatness," he said, "and you will not walk it alone. All of us will walk it with you." Sundar looked at him, a faint but genuine smile breaking through his grief. For the first time since his mother's passing, he felt a small spark of hope flicker inside him, a tiny light in the darkness. As the final moments of the ceremony approached, the hall lights dimmed again, leaving only the soft glow of the oil lamps and the faint golden sunset filtering through the high windows. Sundar stepped forward to stand beside his mother one last time. He placed both hands together in front of his chest, bowing deeply, his forehead almost touching the floor. It was a gesture of ultimate respect, of deep surrender to the love that had shaped him. When he arose, he felt lighter, as if his mother's spirit had already begun to guide him from within. He looked at her face once more, feeling her warmth in every breath. He touched the marigold on her chest, his fingers lingering for a final moment. Outside, the first stars had begun to twinkle faintly in the dusky sky. The gentle evening breeze drifted into the hall, carrying with it the scent of flowers and the distant sounds of evening prayers from nearby temples. It felt as if the entire universe had paused to bow in respect. As people began to leave the hall quietly, many stopped to offer their final prayers, Some touched Sundar's feet, others touched the edge of Lakshmi's sari, seeking blessings. Sundar stood still, receiving each gesture with patience, his eyes meeting each person's gaze with silent gratitude. He saw in their eyes reflections of his mother's spirit, her values echoing through countless hearts. When the hall was nearly empty, Sundar stood alone for a moment beside the circle of lamps and flowers. He closed his eyes, breathing in the stillness, feeling the soft brush of her presence in the air. He heard her voice inside him, gentle and warm. "Be kind, Kanna. Always be kind." He opened his eyes slowly, a tear rolling down his cheek, but a small smile playing at his lips. He turned toward Modi ji, who waited patiently a few steps away. They looked at each other, no words needed. Modi ji stepped forward, taking Sundar's hand firmly in his own. Together, they turned toward the exit, ready to carry forward the legacy of a woman whose quiet love had now become an eternal flame. But as Sundar took the first step forward, he felt a sudden warmth on his shoulder, like a soft hand resting. There. He paused, turning his head slightly, as if expecting to see her standing beside him, her gentle smile lighting up the room. He saw nothing, but he felt her everywhere in his heartbeat, in the whispers of the breeze, in the quiet glow of the lamps. And as he stepped out of the hall, to the cool starlit night, he realized that his journey had just begun. There were mountains to climb, hearts to heal, and lives to touch, all in her name. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on him, but also a deep, comforting strength rising from within, as the car door opened and he turned for one final glance. At the hall, he felt a promise form quietly in his heart, a promise to make her proud every single day, to carry her light into every dark corner he found. He stepped into the car, his mind filled with memories and dreams, and as the car began to move, the stars above seemed to shimmer brighter, as if smiling down at him. But deep in his heart, he knew that even though he had made a promise, he still had to face the world outside, a world that was waiting, watching, and would soon challenge every part of his spirit. He knew the next step would test him in ways he had never imagined. And as the car moved through the quiet streets, he looked out the window, its reflection staring back at him, and he whispered to himself. The car rolled slowly through the narrow streets of Delhi, the soft hum of the engine blending with the quiet night. Sundar leaned his forehead against the window, his eyes tracing the patterns of stars scattered across the deep velvet sky. The city outside felt different now, each flickering streetlight. Each gentle rustle of the trees along the roadside seemed to whisper to him, carrying pieces of his mother's voice. He could almost hear her calling his name softly, urging him to eat more, to rest, to never forget who he was. Inside the car, the silence was thick but peaceful. Modi ji sat beside him, his hands folded neatly on his lap, his eyes reflecting the same weight of shared grief and quiet determination. For a while, neither of them spoke. There was no need for words. The air between them was filled with silent promises and unspoken prayers, the kind that only hearts in deep mourning and deep love could understand. As they approached Sundar's old family home, Sundar felt his chest tighten. The last time he had come here, he had felt excited, like a child running home after a long school day. But now, the house looked different. Its small front gate slightly tilted and rusted at the edges, the tiny jasmine bushes swaying in the gentle breeze. The single bulb glowing weakly above the doorway, everything felt sacred and heavy with memories. The car stopped, and Sundar stepped out slowly. His feet touched the familiar dirt path, and for a moment he stood still, feeling the earth under him, grounding him. He looked up at the small window where his mother used to sit every morning with her cup of tea, watching the sunrise, whispering her morning prayers. He could almost see her silhouette there, her gentle face framed by the soft glow of dawn, as he walked toward the door. His hand reached out instinctively to touch the wooden frame, worn smooth from years of her fingers opening it every day. He pushed it open and stepped inside. The familiar scent of turmeric, sandalwood, and old books washed over him, pulling him back to countless mornings spent listening to her voice, 2 afternoons filled with her soft humming as she cooked, 2 nights when he lay on her lap, staring at the ceiling fan as she told him stories of gods and wise kings, He moved through the small room slowly, touching each piece of furniture, each old photo on the wall, as if greeting old friends. He paused by her favorite chair near the window, the cushion still holding the faint shape of her body. He sat down gently, his hands resting on the armrests, his eyes closing as he leaned back. He felt her presence surround him, warm and comforting. Like a soft blanket on a cold night, Modi Ji stepped inside quietly, watching Sundar from a respectful distance. He walked to the small kitchen, his eyes tracing the simple pots and pans hanging neatly on the wall. He picked up a small brass tumbler, turning it slowly in his hands, feeling the weight of her daily rituals. After a moment, he set it down, carefully, as if it were made of fragile glass. Finally, he walked over to Sundar, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She lives here," he said softly, his voice low and steady. "In these walls, in this chair, in every corner. But most of all, she lives inside you." Sundar nodded slowly, his eyes still closed, a single tear slipping down his cheek. Opened his eyes and looked around, seeing not just the objects, but the moments hidden inside them, the laughter, the quiet evenings, the silent prayers. He felt her everywhere, in every breath he took, in every beat of his heart. They sat together in the small room for a long time, the night unfolding around them like a soft, dark shawl. Outside, the crickets began their quiet chorus. The moon rose higher, casting a gentle light into the room. It felt as if time had stopped, holding them in a safe, sacred pause. Finally, Sundar stood up slowly. He walked to the small wooden trunk near the corner, the one his mother used to keep her most precious things. He opened it carefully, revealing neatly folded saris, a few old letters, some small silver trinkets, and at the very bottom, an old, slightly torn notebook. He picked it up, his fingers trembling slightly. He opened the notebook and found pages filled with simple notes. Recipes, grocery lists, and at the end, a few pages of prayers written in her careful, flowing handwriting. Each word felt like a drop of her soul, each line a whisper from her heart. As he read, he felt a warmth spread through him, a quiet strength rising from deep within. He closed the notebook gently, pressing it against his chest. He looked at Modi Ji, his eyes clear, and filled with a new light. "I will build something in her name," he said softly, but with a firm conviction. "A foundation to support mothers and children, to help them learn, grow, and find strength. It will not just be about education or money. It will be about love, kindness, and silent strength, just like her." Modi Ji nodded, a small smile, breaking through his solemn expression. "That will be her true legacy," he said, "and it will be a gift to the entire world." Over the next few days, the news of Lakshmi's passing spread across the country and beyond. People from every walk of life, rich and poor, young and old, sent messages of condolence and gratitude. These stories began to emerge of how Sundar's mother had inspired them, even from afar. Some shared small memories of seeing her during local festivals. Others spoke of the values she had passed to her son that had touched their own lives. Sundar dedicated himself fully to building the foundation. He named it Ima's Light, a tribute to the quiet fire that had guided him all his life. The foundation focused on supporting single mothers, providing education to young girls, and creating safe spaces where children could learn about kindness, empathy, and resilience. He wanted every child to feel the same warmth he had felt sitting beside his mother. Listening to her gentle stories, tasting her simple meals, he traveled to villages and small towns, meeting mothers who carried the same quiet strength his mother had. He listened to their stories, their struggles, their dreams. In each face, he saw a reflection of her. In each tear, each smile, each calloused hand that carried the weight of entire families. During one visit to a small village, an elderly woman invited him into her mud house. She offered him a cup of hot tea, made with jaggery, just the way his mother used to make. As he sat on her small sharp eye, she talked about her son, who had gone to the city for work and never returned. Sundar listened carefully, his heart aching but also filling with determination. He promised her that no mother would feel abandoned. No child would feel alone if he could help it. Each visit became a seed of new ideas, new programs, and new partnerships. Uma's light grew rapidly, reaching places even the biggest organizations hadn't touched. Sundar refused to do flashy launches or big press events. He chose to walk through narrow lanes, sit under banyan trees, and share meals with families, listening, learning, and quietly helping. Meanwhile, Modi ji continued to support him, guiding him through the challenges of starting such a large and deeply emotional mission. They often sat together late into the night, sipping simple, herbal tea, talking about the power of mothers and the deep roots of kindness that could change the world more than any technology or policy ever could, as weeks turned into months.
Sundar
Felt a transformation inside him. The grief of losing his mother remained, like a soft scar on his heart, but it had turned into a source of strength rather than pain. He felt her with him in every decision, in every child's laughter, in every mother's tearful smile. One evening, as he returned to his family home after a long day visiting villages, he sat again in her favorite chair by the window. The sunset spilled golden light into the room, painting everything in warm shades of orange and pink. He opened her old notebook once more, flipping to the last page where she had written a single line, almost as if she had known he would need it one day. Be a light canna. Even when I am gone, let your kindness be my voice. He read the line over and over, the words sinking deep into his soul. He closed the notebook and placed it carefully on the small wooden table beside him. Looked out the window, watching the streetlights flicker on, one by one, like stars in the night sky. He felt her hand on his shoulder again, warm and gentle. And this time, he did not turn to look, simply closed his eyes, letting her presence fill him completely. As he opened his eyes again, felt a deep, calm smile spread across his face. He stood up, walked to the small kitchen, and started preparing a simple meal, just as she used to do. He cooked rice in a small pot of sambar, placing 2 steel plates on the floor, as if she were there to share the meal with him. He served. The food sat cross-legged and folded his hands in silent prayer. He felt her laugh softly in the air around him, saw her kind eyes sparkle in the dim light of the small bulb above. After he finished eating, cleaned the kitchen carefully, wiping down each surface with the same care she had always shown. Washed the plates, dried them, and stacked them neatly, feeling a quiet satisfaction spread through him as he lay down that night on his old wooden cot. The scent of jasmine drifting in through the open window, he looked up at the ceiling, his eyes heavy with sleep but his heart light. He thought of the long journey ahead, the many lives he would touch, small acts of kindness that would ripple out into the world like soft waves on a quiet lake. He whispered softly into the night, "Amma, I will carry your light, always," and somewhere beyond the stars, beyond the silent moonlit sky, her spirit watched over him, proud, peaceful, and forever present, as he drifted into sleep. His breathing slow and steady, the world outside seemed to pause and listen. The trees swayed gently, the stars shone a little brighter, and the night air carried the softest echo of a mother's love, a love that would live on, shining in every heart he touched, in every kindness he gave, and in every life he helped. And so, Sundar's journey continued. No longer just as a tech leader or a public figure, but as a son who had become a living echo of his mother's gentle strength. He had become her voice, her light, her promise to the world, that love and kindness, no matter how quiet, would always be the strongest force of all.